All right, everyone. So I was asked in the comments from my video on using the Supernote plugin for Obsidian to show kind of how I process the notes. And I think that's a really good point. It's one thing to get the notes into Obsidian. It's another thing to be able to show how those look after they're processed. Now, obviously, I'm not done with these notes, but I did want to show you a little bit of what that might look like. You can see here that I have what is called by some the map of contents. So this is my conferences map of contents. Different conferences that I've attended over the last couple of years. This right here is the most recent one that I showed the other day in the video. And you'll see that I have each of them here. The one I've started to process is the keynote. You'll see that I have put the speaker's name here. I'm waiting on the PowerPoint slides. When I get those, I can go ahead and put those in, and I can also put in a bio for the speaker. You'll notice here that these are kind of a not quite as dark of a color as up here. And that's because they haven't been created as notes yet. That's one thing you'll find out. If you go to Nick Milo or Dan Berg, they'll show you that you can enter things in advance. It's one of the most powerful tools in Obsidian, to be honest, is being able to, as you're writing, add things that you know are going to come later, and then you can branch out. So right here, that's the presentation information. And then, if you'll remember, there were 8 pages of notes here. And I'll just go back real quick and show you what that looks like from the source note, because I've already moved those PNG files to the attachments page. And again, I'm still trying to figure out if I want to keep this one file or if I want to go and keep those separate attachment pages. But it really doesn't matter. That's really your workflow that makes the difference there. Out of those 8 pages, you'll notice that I've separated things out. I took the highlights. I have the content page here, which shows some of the most important takeaways that I had. I used some different formatting. And just so you know, you can use keyboard shortcutting to do this, or sometimes I find it easier, especially if I've forgotten a keyboard shortcut, to highlight. And you can right click and do, whether it's formatting, you can do bulleted list, numbered list, task list, all the different heading options. Some of them I remember off the top of my head, and some of them I don't. If I ever don't, I just right click, just like you would in a word processing program or anything like that. But you'll notice here a lot of different things come up. I condense, I add, so that the notes don't become static. The idea is to expand on these notes. PowerPoint slides I refer to here because there are a bunch of great quotes in the presentation. And instead of relisting all of those here, I try to remember and put in the most important things. I take things that were said that weren't necessarily on the slides, and I do bullet all of those. But again, pointing to things that are very important. I also add in the Q&A, and I put in some learning from there. And if you go back up here to the top, you'll see here some group discussion takeaways. Again, the notes are more for what wasn't covered in the presentation. Or here you'll see the resources. So I separated it from content and then to resources. Resources, I added links in to all of these external links that were talked about. Added some highlights for things that I need to look up. I had a little bit more trouble finding. They weren't readily apparent by searching by name or title, and they're probably in the presentation. So when I get that, when that comes from the conference to the participants, then I can take it and I can fill this back in. Now, again, this is a very rough way of looking at this, and all of the PNGs are right here. So I've condensed that down. Instead of having multiple pages, I just went ahead and turned that into one large heading with all of those pages below. It's a real good way to synthesize and condense and expand on the important points without having to leave it in that large, unwieldy format. And again, this is the beginning. So as I go through this, I may look back and say, well, you know what? This actually ties back to some of the other things we did in the 2023 conference. And if it does, then I can take and I can create a link to one of these other conferences. Now, I haven't even processed all of this yet because, again, Obsidian is new to me. I've only been in it for about 3 weeks, maybe a month at this point. So, this is one of the first notes that I have under the conferences tab begun to process. And I did that again, the request of someone in the comments, which I think is extremely valid. And I think they said this is where the gold is. And I agree. And so hopefully this was helpful. As I mentioned, it was a very quick walkthrough. If you like the content I do, please subscribe to the channel, continue to support me, and I will try to do my best to create as much content as possible that's meaningful and valuable. And keep the comments coming. I really appreciate all of the feedback. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.